The mother of a 15-year-old who was stabbed to death as he walked home from school has said the violence has to stop as the judge allowed the naming of the two teenagers jailed for life of his murder. Kyrie McLean was fatally knifed after being ambushed by Pussy, who was 15, and Giovanni Harriet, who was 17, close to the North Huddersfield Trust School, NHTS, in the West Yorkshire town. Leeds Crown Court heard how the two boys had targeted Kyrie in a revenge attack, with Mr. Pussy being described as jumping into the air and swinging a knife with a 30cm blade. The incident, which was captured on CCTV, was said to have been provoked by Kyrie, sharing a video on social media after Harriet's mother had a window broken on her house. On the 21st of September, the pair waited for Kyrie in an alleyway wearing balaclavas and carrying knives as he walked home with friends. John Sandiford, KC, prosecuting, said they charged towards him aggressively and Mr. Pussy stabbed Kyrie through the chest with what proved to be a fatal blow as it went through his ribs and penetrated one of his lungs and heart. Pussy was sentenced to a minimum term of 16 years for his murder, while Mr. Harriet will serve at least 18 years before being considered for release. The younger defendant had already pleaded guilty to murder, while Mr. Harriet denied murder but was found guilty after a trial earlier that year. In the victim impact statement read to the court, Kyrie's mother, Charlie McLean, said, "I asked myself, what has this achieved? What has my son died for? Nobody has won in this situation. I've lost a child and other parents have lost two sons who have committed this offence. This violence has to stop. Carrying weapons has to stop. I've lost my son and I would not wish this on anyone else." Miss McLean said the boys who attacked her son were cowards, saying he was not given an opportunity to run or defend himself. He was helpless. The fear he went through when realising he had been stabbed and was bleeding to death will stay with me forever. Family and friends of Kyrie sat in the jury box for the sentencing hearing, wearing matching t-shirts featuring his picture. Pre-sentence report on Mr. Pussy concluded that violence against opposing gang members was the norm for him. It was the life that he lived. The court heard that he had began dealing Class B drugs when he was about 13 years old, Class A drugs from the age of 14, and regularly carried a knife. Mr. Pussy also admitted to probation officers that he had a history of gang-related criminality and was shot by masked men when he was 12 in a gang incident. The judge, Mrs. Justice Farby, heard that Mr. Pussy was involved in a Huddersfield gang called the F Block, or Far Time Boys, whose exploits were celebrated by the drill rap artist Booter B. Carl's Isle knife man was jailed for terrifying threats in a burglary. A knife man who threatened a woman after breaking into her home in a burglary has been jailed. Stuart Brown left his victim terrified as she woke up to find him in her bedroom, Cumbria police said before taking her phone in Carl's Isle. At Carl's Isle Crown Court, Mr. Brown, who was 27, formerly of Eskdale Avenue, was jailed for 6 years for aggravated burglary. He received a further 9-month sentence for possessing a bladed article in a public place. Mr. Brown previously admitted to both offences, which took place in June 2019. Court heard how the victim woke to find Mr. Brown in her room wearing a face covering before fleeing. Shortly after, Mr. Brown was identified by the woman from his voice and clothing. After sentencing, Detective Constable Dawn Grant said, "Waking to find a man in your house armed with a knife with his face covered must have been a very terrifying experience. The police and the courts take such offending extremely seriously, particularly when there is a presence of a knife. This is reflected in the sentence handed down by the courts today. There was no excuse for anyone to walk the streets with a knife," adding, "Doing so puts people at a significant risk of serious injury or death, including the person carrying the knife." The brother of the television presenter Philip Schofield has been jailed for 12 years after being convicted of abusing a teenage boy over a 3-year period. Timothy Schofield, who was 54, who was also a civilian police officer with the Avon and Somerset Force at the time of the abuse, was found guilty on 11 sexual offences involving a child. In the statement issued after the convictions last month, Philip Schofield said he was disowning his brother. "These are despicable crimes," he said, "and as far as I'm concerned, I no longer have a brother." Timothy Schofield was convicted of 2 counts of sexual activity with a child, 3 of causing a child to engage in sexual activity, and 3 of causing child to watch sexual activity, and 3 of engaging in sexual activity in the presence of a child. The offences took place between October 2016 and October 2019. A jury at Exeter Crown Court was told the offences emerged after the teenager was persuaded to see two counsellors and revealed what had happened to him. The police were alerted and Mr. Schofield was arrested within 48 hours at his home in Bath. Giving evidence, the teenager told the court he had felt emotionally blackmailed by Mr. Schofield. He said he could not escape from what was happening, though he knew it was weird and wrong, and he said he had been forced into doing it. Asked when he believed when the alleged offending started, he said, "I would say that I was around 13 years old." Mr. Schofield told the jury he watched pornography with the boy, who insisted he was aged over 16 at the time, and that they had masturbated while sat apart. Robin Shellard, prosecuting, told the jury this was a teenager who was criminally abused when he was 13, 14 and 15, and it is something that only came to an end when he was sure enough to deal with it. Mr. Schofield was based at Avon and Somerset Police Headquarters in Portsheath and was suspended from duty in December 2021 when the allegations were first made. Following his convictions, a misconduct hearing was chaired by the Assistant Chief Constable Will White and he was dismissed without notice. Mr. White said, "Timothy Schofield's position as a member of the police organisation makes his responsibility all the greater in terms of his offending behaviour. The harm he's caused has been serious and extensive. His criminal conviction undermines the public's trust and confidence in the police service and its employees who work tirelessly to build that trust, particularly in this time of national scrutiny." He was remanded in custody after his conviction and was sentenced on Friday at Bristol Crown Court by Mrs. Justice Cutts. In the statement released after the verdicts, Philip Schofield said, "My overwhelming concern is, and always has been, for the well-being of the victim and his family. I hope their privacy will now be respected. If any crime has ever been confessed to me by my brother, I would have acted immediately to protect the victim and their family." Politicians have called for the privately run prison to be brought under government control after a regional newspaper published an expose in the conditions in there. Manchester Evening News published a series of reports on the Sodexo-run Forest Bank in Salford, including a claim from an anonymous prison officer that prisoners are able to do almost anything they want because the staff either don't care, aren't experienced enough, or just simply want an easy life. Among the claims made by the paper were that drugs were rife, the brewing of hooch is widespread, and violence is commonplace, and prisoners run the wings. It is also alleged that staff feel unsafe, that a lone prison officer can be left to guard 100 plus inmates, and that staff buy their own uniforms from Marks and Spencer and Asda because not enough is provided for them. In response, Paul Dennett, the Salford City Mayor, and Rebecca Long Bailey, MP for Salford and X, wrote to the Ministry of Justice calling for it to cancel its contract with Sodexo to run the prison and to bring it back under state control. Both politicians are Labour, and Long Bailey is a long-standing critic of the prison privatisation. They said in their joint letter, "We are writing to request the urgent investigation into these reports of mismanagement, with the resultant report to be made publicly available. Further, if the recent reports are indeed confirmed by your investigation, then it would, in our view, be prudent for the prison to be brought under government control with immediate effect." Responding to the newspaper, a spokesperson for the prison said, "HMP Forest Bank effectively services the needs of Greater Manchester courts while managing a complex population at the front end of the prison system. When adjustments to the prison regime are required to guarantee the safety of colleagues and prisoners, those changes are made. We continue to work with the police to tackle the conveyance of illegal items, including a joint operation last week. Over the last 12 months, conveying has reduced, making HMP Forest Bank a safer community for all the staff and prisoners. HMP Forest Bank is always willing to listen to anyone who wishes to raise concerns at a local level." The prison service spokesman told the newspaper, "Privately run prisons are amongst the best performing across the estate and have consistently been praised by independent inspectors. In 1998, under the then Labour government, Sodexo secured a 25-year deal to design, build and run Forest Bank under a private finance initiative contract. It is due to run out in January 2025, and the government has not decided yet whether to extend it. Sodexo, a French-based catering and facilities management group, has this year become the UK's biggest operator of private prisons, with 7 in total, having taken over the contracts to run Loudon Grange, formerly held by Serco, and Alt Course, formerly held by G4S.